The astrology of genius. What's the difference between genius and madness, or do they go hand in hand? Well, let's have a look at the charts of Vincent van Gogh and Adolf Hitler. From a Vedic perspective, the nodes of the moon, Rahu and Ketu, have an intoxicating effect on consciousness. They are outcasts or artisans in the Indian caste system, and thus represent alternative systems of thought that exist in the shadows, outside of the mainstream. When these shadow planets are associated with the planets of consciousness, they often incite pure genius, and at other times sheer madness. The sages of India say we are all drunkards, the only thing that separates us is the quality of the wine we drink. These two examples will show both the illuminative and delusional power of the nodes of the moon, which underpin and prepare the consciousness for its ascent to the light, or descent into darkness. Psychic infection is a malady that has been with us throughout history. Adolf Hitler was a genius in his ability to manipulate the masses. Hitler believed or understood that the masses were run by feminine instinct. By catering to the dark side of the feminine, Lilith, he roused its fears and vengeful rage and unleashed a psychic plague that infected an entire nation and ultimately the whole world. As a master of mass hypnosis, he intentionally seduced the masses by making people feel comfortable with their prejudices. Then he would whip them up into an emotional frenzy. At the height of this mesmerization, he could implant the most bizarre suggestions into the unconscious, and the individual isolated in the masses was virtually powerless to resist the tide of mob rule. Adolf H. and Vincent V. Gogh have an almost identical configuration. Hitler has his natal Ketu in Capricornus conjunct the Moon and Jupiter, in opposition to his Rahu in Cancer. Vincent's Ketu is also conjunct Moon Jupiter but in Sagittarius, opposition Rahu in Gemini. Without having to look at any of the other planets, we can immediately locate the signs of their shared madness and genius, which immediately addresses the ghost in the room. The nodes are not physical planets, they are agencies of an unseen astral world. They are our nightmares, our deepest fear about ourselves. They are phantoms' thoughts. They exist in the cracks between light and shadow. They are an accumulation of all our fears and self-loathing. They know above all who we really are, because they are the accumulation of our merit and karmic debts. Adolf Hitler was said to have awakened his third eye from psychotropic drugs and occult mastery, in which he saw visions or apparitions of a great Azura Lord called the Lord of Nations. Hitler said 10 of millions of innocent people died. In Vincent's case, it's long been debated what were the exact nature and cause of his apparent madness. Many scholars have examined and detailed the artist's hallucinations, which Van Gogh described as unbearable, in the medical records in the town archives. It is recorded that Van Gogh suffered an attack of acute mania with visual and auditory hallucinations that led him to mutilate himself by cutting off his ear. He might well have done this in a desperate effort to silence the terrible noises or words that he believed he was hearing. In the utmost desperation, Van Gogh might have believed that by removing his ear he would no longer hear the dreadful sounds that were driving him crazy. It's interesting to note before we proceed that both men shared a love of painting. Hitler had failed ambitions of obtaining a degree in the arts community. Like Vincent, his paintings were ignored or considered inferior. The nodes of the moon have no actual results. They are almost completely astral in nature, and yet they function much like the hungry ghosts in Buddhism. They feed off neurosis and the host's willingness to surrender to their dark thoughts. They have no restraint. They desire to experience vicariously feeling and excitements denied to them in the astral worlds they occupy. The nodes and the dark moon are aspects of the fallen ones. They are psychic vampires, soul-sucking agencies with no mercy and insatiable cravings. At their core, they represent man's true or hidden nature. The nodes of the moon can locate a soul's fall from grace, their culpability in the plan of salvation, the price they were prepared to pay to satisfy their appetites. In the natal chart of Vincent van Gogh, Mercury, the Archangel Gabriel, is exactly conjunct the Queen of Hell Lilith, the dark moon in Aries. Lilith, like the nodes of the moon, isn't a physical object either. It's a mathematical point in space. It embodies the very essence of the goddess Lilith, the first wife of the biblical Adam. She is the mother of Cain and perdition. In a natal chart, the black moon Lilith represents a person's primitive impulses and behavior in their rawest form, and so when it's aspecting Mercury, it's designed to manifest some otherworldly consciousness. In the birth chart of Adolf H, Lilith is conjunct an exalted Venus Lakshmi and Mars, the god of war, in Taurus. In order to understand the trauma that fall of the angels from the pleroma, and Adam's exile from Eden, we need to understand that his first wife was Lilith, a strange female creature with an independent soul. If we have any doubt about how we got here, we must begin to realize that Lilith didn't just disappear. In actuality, she took plant in the human psyche, in the desert's retains of the mind, where she allegorical marries the king of the devils, Asmodeus, and gives birth to a legion of twisted thoughts and perversions. And if we is in any doubt the implications of how that manifests in human destiny, then let history be our instructor. It's been a bloodbath, and it's all us, and yet these demons also coexist with our inner angels, with better choices, with hope and forbearance, with joy, genius and paradoxical opportunities. That's the truth about us. We are demons and angels at the same time, in the same instance, and yes, we can trace the root cause or antecedents of these tendencies in our birth charts. We can do that because we designed it ourselves. We mixed the good and the bad in ways that seemed implausible and then owned it. We didn't suck or blame it on Satan. We confessed that we are our own Satans, our own salvation. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who had a seemingly cursed moon Rahu conjunction in Sagittarius, believed that if you looked deeply into the human psyche you would discover that beneath our vanity and the masks we display, we are the only animal severed from our instincts and hence, the sickest species ever to have walked this earth. We have learned better. And yet the diabolical exists, it can't be denied, it bubbles in us, and while it can remain dormant or comatose or contained in most people, it only needs a trigger, a Pied Piper to incite mass suicide and mass destruction. Nietzsche's, whose contempt for humanity has been noted, was yet of the view that man, for all his contradictions and diabolical urges, is uniquely placed to use these light and dark powers to literally overcome himself and human nature. In essence, an overman is one who has superseded the bondage of the human condition and reached a liberated state, one of free play and creativity. And that's not some sort of metaphysical return to the pleroma. In actuality, the fall was a rebellion against an undifferentiated state of consciousness. From a psychological perspective, one can begin to grasp the profound message which jumps out of the pages of the Book of Job. That dialogue between Yahweh and Satan contains the raw truth about who the gods are. Even if they are mere projections of the human imagination, they establish the proof that consciousness as such is always evolving, it's never stagnant. And yet it's also scary, it's precarious, and of course with Job we have an example of overcoming. It's a similar story with the carpenter Jesus. At some point we need to wrestle with our inner demons. And yet of course the most terrifying truth is that everything about us remains probable. As much as we might like to exorcise our inner demons, the truth is that we have from the beginning less struggled with our choices, and that will never change. There are no gods, there is no pleroma, and yet here we are at the coalface of an extraordinary cosmic drama, each of us with a seed fragment of that semi-divine essence dealing with its gifts and cursed as best we can.